Another summer day has come and gone away from Paris or Rome, but I wanna go home. Maybe surrounded by a million people, I still feel all alone. Just wanna go home. Oh, I miss you, you know. And I've been keeping all the letters that I wrote to you, each one a line or two. I'm fine, baby, how are you? Well, I would send them, but I know that it's just not enough. My words were cold and flat, and you deserve more than that. Another aeroplane, another sunny place. I'm lucky, I know, but I wanna go home. I got to go home. Let me go home. I'm just too far from where you are. I wanna come home. I feel just like I'm living someone else's life. It's like I just stepped outside when everything was going right. And I know just why you could not come along with me. This was not your dream, but you always believed in me. Another winter day has come and gone away in either Paris or Rome, and I wanna go home. Let me go home. And I'm surrounded by a million people. I still feel alone, and let me go home. Oh, I miss you, you know. Let me go home. My run, baby, I'm done. I gotta go home. Let me go home.
Hello everyone, I am MD and this is the 4th branch program, the place for common sense. Welcome to a very special edition of the program. Today we will continue the conversation about the cost of human trafficking and why we as a society should fight as much as possible to put an end to the private prison industry. We will also take a look at the heated race to 2020, how many Democrats are trying to unseat Donald Trump from the Oval Office. And we will also take a look at other issues as they come up. Much more to come. Please stay with us. We will be right back to discuss those very important topics which impact our lives. You are on the 4th branch program, the place for common sense. I am MD, host of the 4th branch program, inviting you to join me every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and every weekday at 2 p.m. for discussions of social political issues and to dissect the meaning and the importance of current events, as well as to understand topics of legislations. The 4th Branch Project is not associated with any political party And we at the Fourth Branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to work towards achieving a more perfect union by removing ignorance, the biggest obstacle to our democracy. Stay with us. We will be right back. What is human trafficking? The picture you're currently looking at is usually the one used in order to point to the very problem that human trafficking causes. It hurts not just the individual which is kidnapped, usually a child, usually a young girl, of course not exclusively, but nevertheless. And it is a very major problem here in the United States of America, well, across the world. According to a 2005 stat that's provided by in FBI database, in 2005 alone, we had more than 841,000 people, adults and children, which were kidnapped, abducted. Now, according to FBI, 85 to 90% of those abducted, roughly 750,000 people, were children. Think about that for just a moment. 2,000 children kidnapped per day right here in the United States of America. It is very rare that once a child is abducted, you would ever hear from that child again. That's the reason when we have in the news a child who has been abducted is recovered, there is a lot of jubilation, a lot of emotional joy, tears, not only of the parents, but of the community, of the country. And the reason is very simple, is because it doesn't happen that often. In other words, across the country, we're not in a war zone, we're not in a third world country, and yet every single day 2,000 children are missing. Most of us would just go about our business. We don't care because, well, we're not impacted. And that is unfortunately the way that our society has become. If something doesn't affect you, if something doesn't impact you, you simply shrug it off, walk away, ignore it. I've seen individuals who tune in, or tune out rather, to a different station, whether it's TV or radio, just because an announcement comes on and pointing out children that are missing. They simply do not care. They simply don't want to hear about that. It is sad that in our society, this is the way we have become. If you want to translate it in much simpler term, every 40 seconds, yes, 40 seconds, not 1 minute, every child is missing in the United States of America. Now, I understand it may not be your child, and that's the reason we all go about our business and we shrug it off because it doesn't impact us personally. It should. Today, I'm going to show you a dark side of that problem. It is already an emotional problem, an emotional roller coaster for the parents of that child, and of course fear for that child who is abducted, usually by someone they may know, someone that may be very familiar in the neighborhood, someone who may even friend of the family. But once the abduction is performed, that child could spend the rest of his or her life without ever seeing his or her parent again. Now, for those parents, it is not just a stat. It is real life. It is the loss of a child. It is the impossibility of understanding exactly what happened to their child. And sometimes parents blame themselves because they think it's something that they either did or did not do. That's why their child disappeared. Sometimes they think the child just ran away. Usually that's not the case. But why? Why do we have that problem? Because if you think about it logically, no one wants to have somebody else's child. On a general basis, that is. You don't want to be taking care of somebody else's child. In fact, as that I've already provided to us the information that as time goes by, we, the American families, have been having less and less children. Yes, there are exceptions, of course, but in general, that's a trend, which means we are conscious that we want to limit the number of children we have in order to either be able to provide for them much easily, or to simply because we don't have time anymore to take care of dozens of children. So that begs the question, why we have 2,000 children missing every day in the United States of America? Who is taking them? What exactly is going on? When we return, we will discuss this and related issues to human trafficking and how it has been causing not only human casualties, emotional, financial, and we in the world, in society, must be re-engaged in order to help solve that problem. Because today you may not be impacted, but don't count on it for you to always be out of the woods, so to speak. As such, we should demand more to be done from our government. But first, an announcement, and we will come back to talk about human trafficking. We began the conversation last week And we try to provide not just statistic about the problem in terms of the number of children disappearing, leaving their house, leaving familiar ground, and finding themselves in predicament that, well, that's not welcoming. Young girls are forced to prostitution, and it is safe to assume that most likely today young boys are also forced into that. It is sad, but in the underworld of our society, there are groups who have as a business abducting children and selling them. Yes, you heard correctly. Their job is to abduct, to kidnap children, and to sell them. Now, there are people who may want a child. Usually those people go through the process of adoption, because you would not want someone to abduct a child and not to force the child to become yours. No logical individual would do something like that, because the whole point of adopting a child is so that you can pour love and care for that child. So the relationship cannot start with a child being abducted, deprived of his or her parents, and passed to you and expect that child to love you. So this is not the point of abduction and kidnapping children. Most of the time, the individuals that are involved in kidnapping children, they also involved in selling those children to other parties. The third party, if you like, would use those children mostly in prostitution. Now, we don't have any any reliable statistic to say that X children are kidnapped and X minus Y are put into prostitution. But we can say for certain that those children are not put for adoption. At least we say most of them are not put for adoption. They are forced to do they are enslaved, they are forced into prostitution, and as such those children's lives are destroyed completely, while their parents spend days, nights without sleep, and looking for a child that may never come back. But the problem is not just the people who kidnap the children. Yes, they are criminals, they are a major part of the problem. But there is also another side to human trafficking. Is the side that we call the client. As you might imagine, if you have a business and you sell a product or you provide a service and nobody wants it, then the choice is pretty simple. You close down the business or you move into another business. That's really a logical conclusion. There is no if and but about it. If I'm selling this pen and that's my business, and day 1, day 5, day 100, day 1000, nobody cares for the pen, now it would be foolish to continue in that business. So logic would tell me, well, the pen business is not really a lucrative business, so I might as well go do something else. which brings me to the conversation of the clients in human trafficking. The clients are the individual who solicits service for those from the third party who use those kidnapped children, and usually prostitution. In other words, the client is somewhat responsible, even if you want to say indirectly, but is somewhat responsible for the problem. Because those who kidnap those children, they see them as asset, they see them as product, and they enslave them, they beat them, they inflict on them corporal punishment so that they can become obedient, and they prostitute them. As such, the clients, those individuals who go to those places, to those venues, and befed those children, those people are also criminals, and they should be held accountable for this problem. Now, I say all that for a simple reason. The business of kidnapping children, it is very difficult for society, even our government, that has unlimited resources, and our governments across the world have put a lot of resources behind fighting human trafficking. It's money and human resources and technology, all there helping government across the world to stamp down human trafficking. And despite the progress we have made, we have drones that can watch from the sky and see what's going on, and yet we have not, as a society, made any progress as capturing those individuals who are kidnapping our kids. So we have to turn to the other side of the equation, which is the clients. The clients, although they try to also stay unidentified, invisible, but it's not as difficult to find them because there are venues. Those places are usually run by someone, a woman they call Madame. We have that in downtown New York, in Manhattan, where wealthy individuals, rich people, they go and presumably they go for massage. And usually in those venues, massage is just the term used so that those individuals are not identified as people who go for sexual pleasure in those places. So those venues, usually they are parties into which the kidnapped children may end up there. You may recall that the past couple of weeks we've been talking about this individual, Robert Kraft. He's been charged of soliciting sex. Now, there is nothing wrong with a wealthy individual who wants to solicit sex. He has money, he wants to pay for it, be it. Nobody cares. And besides, I doubt that that guy he has whatever he's looking for, then he can pay for it. And if you have a grown-up prostitute who decides that, and besides that, I'm not here to judge people who are in prostitution. I'm not here to judge for or against. That's not my role here. What I'm here to discuss is the fact that Robert Kraft happened to be a client. And in the investigation that's currently ongoing, it seems that he is embroiled in what is called sex trafficking. Another way to say human trafficking. Now, people such as Robert Kraft, he is a wealthy individual. You know him, or you may know him. If not, he is currently the New England Patriot owner, NFL football team. So he has plenty of money to spend, and he can spend it whichever way he wants. Except for one problem, that Robert Kraft is a client, and it seems that he may be involved in this particular predicament that we're looking at, which is human trafficking. Now, he's not the one doing it. Don't get me wrong. He's not the one doing it, but he has demand for specific, product, girls, young women. So he has, and that's how the business works. You have clients who has very specific tastes, who ask for very specific women or girls, and the venue would entrust a third party, and that venue may not even know how they get those girls, although you would be stupid not to know that those girls have to be kidnapped, because usually those girls are minor. So in order to satisfy the client, those venues would ask, because more likely than not, those venues would not have their own people kidnapping children. They would get their product, if you like, the young girls, the young women, from a third party. The third party, the way that happens is when they kidnap a girl, they would go through the process of reprogramming the girls, meaning they try the nice thing, the nice way of talking to the girls about how life would become better for them, because they would be making money, they would be meeting famous people. And there are times when those girls would be punished physically, corporal punishment, slapped around, beaten, starved, in order for them to comply. So the part that I'm describing to you is a side that's missing even in the conversation of human trafficking. Because most of the time, those kids, those children, those young girls turn women later, never come back home. Some of them end up dead, killed, depending on how much that child, that young girl resists. If they find that there is no way around it, they would simply dispose of. And the reason they cannot just let the girl go, because that girl may jeopardize their business. So that's why sometimes they end up being found years later dead in some rivers, or they found their bones somewhere, been buried somewhere. So the human trafficking business, while it is very difficult to put our hands on those criminals kidnapping our children, maybe we should start putting a lot of giving a lot of punishment to those clients, because while they have really great legal representation that try to get them out of the predicament they're in, but we as a society, if we're really serious about solving the human trafficking problem, we should make example out of the clients, whoever that individual is. Because if we keep looking at the fact that a client has money, is wealthy, is a well-respectable individual, and yet is a client encouraging human trafficking, and we say, well, we treat those people different. In other words, we don't care about human trafficking. All we're saying is, if the individual we catch is a quote-unquote scumbag, then we'll throw the book at him. But the problem is, the client is never that. The client is always that individual who is wealthy and who doesn't want anyone to know that he solicits young girls for sex. So if our society is serious about putting an end to human trafficking, the first thing you have to do is cut the business legs, and the clients feed the business financially. As I mentioned to you earlier, if I'm selling this pen and nobody buys, then I would have to stop selling pens. Now, if those people kidnapping our children no longer find venues to give those children to, then they would have to stop kidnapping children. It is a simple equation. It's not that difficult. But when we give a pass to people like Robert Kraft, because, hey, he's a rich individual, we cannot really punish rich people too harshly, can we? Then the idea of fighting human trafficking is just a joke. Because the whole point of putting an end to a problem is by unrooting, removing the roots of the problem. And as it stands today, of course, I use Robert Kraft. He's not alone. There are a bunch of other wealthy individuals that embroil in those type of sex trafficking. But if every time that we look at a wealthy individual, because that individual has great legal representation, because he can pay for it, and then we give a pass to that individual, then the idea of stamping down human trafficking is a waste of time. We might as well resign ourselves to the fact that we're losing 2,000 children per day, because the people who feed the business can continue to feed the business. So why would that business not continue to strive? And that's really the big dilemma we have in the human trafficking in the United States of America. Join me here on the 4th branch at 10:30 a.m. every Saturday. And every weekday at 2 p.m. This is the 4th branch.
Common sense in a world of chaos.
This program will resume in just a moment. If you join me for the first time, once again, welcome. I would encourage you to visit our People Branch YouTube channel. This is where we have all the previous episodes that we discuss here on the 4th branch. You can follow the steps on the screen in order to get to the 4th branch YouTube channel. And once you're there, you can browse through, or you can search for a particular topic. Now the discussion we're having is human trafficking, the prison industry, the private prison industry rather, and of course we're discussing the race, the road to 2020. While you're in the YouTube channel, I would encourage you to subscribe to the channel, and that would provide us the opportunity to send you invite, to send you updates, and also to keep you abreast of the activities we have on this front. We'll be right back. Ignorance, they say, is the biggest threat to any democracy. Indeed, it is. Plato, a Greek philosopher born in 427 BC, said that ignorance is the root and stem of all evil. Today, members in the Republican Party wear ignorance as a badge of honor, while the rest of the country watch powerless the destruction of a country which was once the envy of the world. The media is the enemy of the country, said Donald Trump. The Democrat legislators are obstructionists for not going along with everything the president wants. The Department of Justice is biased for investigating corruption in the Trump administration. This is the United States of America. Any question? Donald Trump is wrong to call the media the enemy of the people. Throughout history, dictators, authoritarians have always tried to delegitimize the media in order to get away with corruption, scandal, and yes, even abuse. Adolf Hitler did exactly the same thing in 1933, accusing the media of fabrication. Journalists are not in the business of fairness. Our only business is to be objective. It is our duty to hold Trump and every administration accountable. Today, it is urgent. It is necessary. It is critical. Our very freedom depends on it. Tomorrow, when we come back, we will continue the conversation about human trafficking, but we will also address another important aspect of this conversation, which is prison for kids, the private prison industry. Those are topics which are not just important to talk about, but which go at the core of what our society has become and how we those who are so eager to become wealthy, we those who are so eager to bash anyone who make a plea for more humanity, we would not stop at anything to make money. As such, as I just discussed, those who go into human trafficking, it is for only one purpose, it's to make money. The private prison industry has been in the United States for, well, quite some time now. The very first one was in 1852, and it has been striving in the United States of America. Now most of us, we simply just don't care whenever we hear prison, jails, or anything close to that, because we don't have anything to do with the government or with jails or with anything that would lend us there. Again, as a society, our disconnect from what's going on in the country, from what's going on in our government, put the future generation in serious jeopardy. So tomorrow we will address that very important topic, which is the private prison industry. When we return, we will take a look at the race to 2020. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
After reading several books based on presidents and on Obama specifically, I found that they're typically partisan. The Obama legacy targets the heart of the issue by giving credit to the president where it's due, but definitely coming down hard on Obama on his bigger failures, like his handling of the Syrian crisis.
If you are in college, going to college, you are an educator, a faculty member, or someone with interest in government or politics, the Obama Legacy is definitely a book to read.
My professor recommended The Obama Legacy.
A friend actually recommended The Obama Legacy.
I would highly recommend this book for anyone, whether for academic use or leisure reading.
I would recommend this book to anyone out there searching for an impartial and unbiased look into Barack Obama's tenure as president.
I would definitely recommend this book as a good read for both liberals and conservatives.
It has never been a time in history when it becomes absolutely necessary for all citizens of a country to re-engage in order to reclaim what has been lost. For the past 2 years, 3 to be exact, the country has been going through tumultuous time. And that is not because the United States was attacked by some foreign entity, although that's debatable. It's not because the United States is at war and we, the citizens of the country, we are anxious and we don't know how things are going to turn. But rather because the individual that was the country picked in the 2016 presidential election has caused the country to be in that state. Yes, the president of the United States is usually the individual whose job is to calm the public, whose job is to reassure everyone that it's okay. Even when things are bad, even when things don't look good, it is usually the job of the president of the United States to reassure everyone, not just here in the United States, not just a citizen of the United States, but the world, that it's going to be okay. And that has been the role of the United States for at least the past 5 to 7 decades until 2016. Now, to those who voted for Donald Trump, this is the best thing that has happened since sliced bread. But to the rest of us in this country, including, well, the rest of the world, this is one of the most difficult periods in the history of the world. First, the United States is no longer the leader of the world. Well, at the very least, the world doesn't look up to the United States for leadership anymore. That much we know. And here at home, the President of the United States is at the center of setting division. No, this is not just a word. We usually talk about the big divide in the country. Because, well, Democrats are always fighting with Republicans and vice versa. But we never have, until 2016, a president who has made it his job to divide the country. And every time he gets a chance, that's what he does. So, the road to 2020 must be considered very carefully for a couple of reasons. One, we don't want to have to repeat the 2016 outcome. And two, we would like the United States of America to, well, take back the leadership that it had for several decades. Three, we would like the next president of the United States to be an individual not only capable of, but also willing to reunite the country. So we will be looking at each one of those candidates. Today we're going to introduce them to you, and as we continue this program, we will take a much in-depth look at each one of those individuals and tell you what you should expect if that individual become the nominee for the Democrat Party. I'll be right back. To start you off, let me introduce to you actually a song. It is a song that I use to talk about the candidates, or to talk about the race to 2020. From that point forward, it's called "I Want to Be Your Number One." And the reason I decided to pick that song, and you'll notice at the end of this program, I'll have the same video to leave you with. And it is an interesting song, and we will use that song again as a way of introducing candidate and as a way of talking about 2020. Here you go.
kind of guy who will love you all over. love undercover. I'm just the kind of guy who will love you all over. And you're just the kind of girl who could watch me keel over. The tide is high, but I wanna be your number one. The tide is high, but I wanna be your number
one. I hope you enjoy this song, and again we will be using this as our background music for the 2020 presidential race. Now let's take a look at what's the candidate that trying to become your number one. It is also my hope that the Republican Party has a challenger for Donald Trump. It is really my greatest hope that's the case, because as it stands today, the way that things works, the incumbent who belongs to a particular party would usually not have serious candidates challenging him. But this time, this is not your regular time in this country. So I'm hoping that's the case. Now, let's take a look at the road to 2020. Now, let's first take a look at a very specific candidate. We're going to be taking a look at each one of those candidates individually and tell you a little bit about each one of them. Not that you don't know about those candidates, because obviously some of them are more, you may be more familiar with some of them than you are with others. But nevertheless, let's take a look at those candidates, shall we? Now, he is someone that you have to be very familiar with. His name is Bernie Sanders. Now, Bernie Sanders he challenged Hillary Clinton in 2012 for the nomination of the Democrat Party. You may also recall that there was some serious fight between those two, and it looks like there are still some bad blood in between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. Now, Bernie Sanders is 77 years old. He is a senator from. He's an independent senator from Maine or from Vermont, and he was born in Brooklyn. He declares himself as a Democratic Socialist. He was mayor of Burlington, Vermont in '81. He became later the representative for the state in 1990, and in 2006 he became senator for the state of Vermont. In fact, he is probably the longest living independent legislator in Washington. Now, of course, he challenged Hillary Clinton in 2016. He didn't make it, and he's back to try one more time. So we'll see what happened. And one particular thing about Bernie Sanders is the fact that he ran the whole campaign of 2012 without taking a single penny from large corporations, from big donors. So he ran his campaign exclusively getting funded by the very people who supported him. And that was a movement that a lot of people think that was fantastic, and they hope that others can copy that as well. We're hoping that's the case as well. Now, he's a gentleman that he wasn't really known for anything until, well, you may recall that what brings Beto O'Rourke to the front page is the fact that he ran for the Senate seat in Texas. Now, he's not a well-known individual. Well, he wasn't, but in Texas, you may recall that Texas is a Republican state, and Beto is a Democrat. So he performed so well in the state that Ted Cruz, who has been a senator and pretty much felt comfortable being there, not being challenged, because hey, who would even try to get Ted Cruz out of the way? Now it so happened that, guess what? It was Beto. Beto actually was so effective that Ted Cruz had to call on Trump to help him out. Now, that was something to see. You may not necessarily recall the details behind Ted Cruz and Trump during the presidential election, in which Donald Trump insulted Ted Cruz's wife, and he also accused Ted Cruz's father of being the assassin for JFK. So there are a lot of bad blood between those two people, and yet Ted Cruz felt that his situation was so dire that he could not but fall his tail and then ask Trump to stop for him. Now, Ted Cruz ended up winning the state, but by just 3 points over Beto. Now, that's what put Beto on the map, because people saying, we're talking about a red state, and to have someone like Beto, we're not talking about someone who had any name or someone who had recognition, but someone who was just unknown and was giving Ted Cruz a run for his money. So a lot of Democrats are putting a lot of stocks on him. In fact, even after his defeat in the 2018 midterm election, they were already chanting 2020, and of course nobody knew that he was going to jump in, but he did. And now that it's for real, the question is, can Beto deliver to the Democrat what he almost did for the Democrat in Texas? It is something we will follow and find out where exactly he's going with that. Now, he's a guy, Cory Booker. You may not necessarily, he's been making some noise, but you may recall that he was mayor of Newark, mayor in New Jersey, and he first came into the spotlight when there was a huge snowstorm, and it was really very bad. And Booker not only was out there also shoveling snow in front of other people who could not make it out because it was really pretty bad, but also his team with him was helping him deliver food and necessity for people who were trapped inside their houses. So that automatically get people to talk about that mayor, and that was Booker. Now, Booker is only 49 years old. He's been in politics for almost 17 years now. Well, he's pretty young as someone who already grabbed that spotlight. Now, there is also something that happened not too long ago that you may recall during the Brett Kavanaugh hearing for the Supreme Court. Cory Booker did something that also gained national attention. Because Chuck Grassley was hiding, didn't want to release some documents about Brett Kavanaugh, and what Cory Booker did, despite the fact he was threatened that would be held against him in the House, in the Senate rather, he decided no matter what would come his way, he didn't care, so he released the document, and that automatically created a partisan bickering between Democrat and Republican, and of course nothing happened to Cory Booker, but that put him on the national stage. Now Cory Booker is a rising star. Now he's not is probably we cannot gauge him and pin him against Beto and say who would be best to take on Donald Trump, because the way that it looks today, at least to the Democrat, it seems that everybody is trying to find, well, the Democrats are trying to find someone who can beat Donald Trump. Well, it is not necessarily a good recipe, but we'll reserve our comments for some other time, since today we're taking it specifically to talk about, give you a little bit of background on the candidate. Now, would Cory Booker, could Cory Booker become that individual to take on Donald Trump? We don't know, but it's a story to follow, and we'll take a look at that as we get as we continue the conversation about candidate. Now, here is someone you have to know about that individual, because she's been in the news for way before Donald Trump even fathomed the idea of becoming president of the United States, way before Donald Trump even thought of bidding for the presidency of the United States. Her name, of course, is Elizabeth Warren. Now, Elizabeth Warren, you may recall, was at some point serving in the Obama administration, and she is in fact I become aware of Elizabeth Warren on YouTube, and the way that I guess I become aware of her is because a few years back she put out I believe she was bidding for the Senate seat in Massachusetts, and she put out a video on YouTube in which she was talking about all the individuals, especially on the Republican side, who always claim to as if you do business and you become successful, it's like you do it on your own. But Elizabeth Warren challenged the idea that that's the case, and the reason she challenged that idea is because she was putting in play a number of a number of items that the government, meaning we the people, we the taxpayer, would pay for it. And she pointed out the roads that are built. The roads that were built were not built by business people. They were built by the government, well, meaning the taxpayers. Now, there are a bunch of other items that she discussed, and trying to point to the fact that, well, while someone may have a business mind, someone may be very good at managing business and so on and so forth, but one thing that should be kept, that should always be looked at as part of a success of any business is the fact that we, the taxpayer, we contribute to the business. So we, at the very least, need some sort of for lack of a better term, some sort of rewards, some sort of kickbacks for, well, kickbacks is really a bad word for to talk about that, but some sort of reward for helping with the process. And in fact, she's right. While business people may be stomping their chest and say that they're successful because they work hard, they did this, they did that, but in reality, without the taxpayers chipping in, there are there are expenses that the business would have to incur. For instance, if there were no good road for you to ship your product from one place to the other, then it will take longer for your product, whatever that product is, to reach its destination. It will be more expensive, and so on and so forth. So in a sense, that while business people are trying to completely discard or reject Mrs. Warren argument, but there is some truth to it, that we, the taxpayers, we contribute a great deal into every business success. So as such, no business individual can just claim the success as being I succeed on my own, so I don't owe anybody anything, because again, as she pointed out, that there are a number of things that are currently available in place, and all those things were made, were created, were put in place by our government, which happen to do all that from the taxpayers' money. So she has a point. Elizabeth Warren, I believe, is 69 years old? Is it? Elizabeth Warren is probably around that age bracket, and she is a lot into consumers protection. She is passionate about that. She rail against big banks, against big businesses that makes it impossible for the small guys to strive. They gulp all the oxygen out of the remove all opportunities for businesses. As such, if you an individual want to get into business, you may find it not as easy, because the large businesses already make certain that you set for failure. So Mrs. Warren wants to break up large businesses, and she already put her plan out for that. She talks about breaking Facebook, she talks about breaking Google, she talks about breaking Apple, and needless to tell you that she already makes a lot of enemies. Now, this gentleman, Jay Inslee, well, you may not have heard that name at all, as a matter of fact, because even I didn't know much about Jay Inslee, or I'm not sure if that's the way it's pronounced, but anyway, I didn't know much about him until he decided to bid for the presidency of the United States. Now, he was a two-term governor in Washington, which is considered as a purple state. He is a big proponent for climate change. He seems to put a lot of stock on climate change, and he is also the current president I should say he is the current president of the Democratic Governors Association. He doesn't make a lot of noise in terms of his ideas. Now, this is not to say that this is gonna stay that way, because as you may recall, even the time that John McCain, the late John McCain, bid for the presidency of the United States, I believe it was 2008? 2008. Yeah, I believe it was 2008, going against Obama. You may recall that he stumbled on the first step. His New Hampshire, the New Hampshire primary were pretty much a disaster for him. But in the end, he managed to recover, and he became the nominee for the Republican Party. So this is to say that we don't know much about Jay Inslee today, but that doesn't mean he's gonna stay unknown. That doesn't mean he's not gonna be making some wave at some point, and who knows? But that's the way things goes. Now he is 68 years old, and he is. But I don't personally know what to expect of Jay Inslee. As I mentioned earlier, I didn't know much about him until he jumped into the race. Now he is someone. Although I'm currently presenting to you individuals who already declared their candidacy. Now that guy, Joe Biden, needs no introduction. He has not declared his candidacy yet, but he's been keeping a lot of people in suspense, and I'm not sure what to expect of him, because Democrats, he still has a fan base. It's just Joe, Uncle Joe. He still has a fan base, and he's still the same Joe Biden that we know of. You may recall that he served as Barack Obama whip for the 2 terms, and at some point everybody thought that he would have just walked away from this whole thing, and it seems that Joe Biden is not ready to do that. Now, can Joe Biden take on Donald Trump? Now, a lot of people seem to think so. Now, and by a lot of people, the person who is most concerned about that is Donald Trump himself. Donald Trump seems to be very afraid of that idea that Biden would bid for the presidency of the United States. Now, Joe Biden is 76 years old. He's been in politics forever. Now, everybody likes Joe Biden. They like the way he is. He has good demeanor. He's funny. He's calculated. And, of course, people seem to think that this is the type of individual we would want to have in the Oval Office. Now, Donald Trump is afraid of Joe Biden, but that doesn't mean anything, because Joe Biden would have to challenge to win the Democrat nomination in order to be the person facing Donald Trump, right? Because now we don't know that it's going to happen. Now, Joe Biden, on his hand, he seems to fear the idea that people see him as being too old, and also there is a sense in Joe Biden's camp that he may not make it, which means if he bid for the presidency, if he announced his candidacy for the presidency of the United States, and he doesn't make it to the end, it will leave a sour taste on Joe Biden's camp. So that's probably the reason Joe Biden has been hesitating, has been dropping crumbs, has been trying to tell people yes. And in fact, not a couple of weeks ago, he said something that clearly tells people, that send the audience cheering, because it's almost as if he said, I'm running for the presidency of the United States. Now, one tidbit that you may not know is the fact that Joe Biden, it's rumors, we don't know if it's true, but it's rumors that Joe Biden has been talking to Stacey Abrams. Now, Stacey Abrams is that individual, black individual in Georgia, who bid for the governorship of Georgia in 2018, and who was routed because of a number of irregularities in the voting system by then the Secretary of State. So the rumors have it that Joe Biden is considering making the announcement for his bid to the presidency of the United States, and at the same time introduce his running mate, Stacey Abrams. Now, that has never been done before. The closest we got to that is Ted Cruz in 2016, when he was trying to fight off Donald Trump, and he introduced his running mate, at that time was Carly Fiorina, who who previously was also a candidate and who exited the race. And Ted Cruz decided to bring Carly Fiorina to help out. It did not. So, could the introduction of a running mate right off the bat help Joe Biden? To be continued. Now, he is an individual that also doesn't have, it's not that he's unknown. John Delaney is not unknown, but he's not, I wouldn't consider him a popular individual either. He was a representative from Maryland. He was a representative there, and at some point, I believe that he was. Let's take a quick look to see if we can find what else John Delaney was what. I can't find much about that guy. It's well, we know he's trying to bid for. He's trying to become the Democrat nominee. Let's see if I find something that can help me get out of this. I cannot find anything about John. Maybe the research wasn't done. All right, he's John Delaney. He's 55 years old. He hasn't been in politics. Now that makes perfect sense. He hasn't been in politics for that long. He's been in politics for only 6 years. So he's I guess he's another candidate who's trying to bring his view to the surface. And what is his big idea? It's to build a for the economy, that is to build a public and private international coalition against China's intellectual property theft and competes against China in Asia. So that is big idea. That's what he's pushing forth as far as his as what he brings to the table. So we don't have really much about John Delaney, obviously, because he hasn't been in politics for that long. And second, his idea to take on China is not really a new idea. You may recall that Donald Trump pretty much bet his campaign on being the person who can take on China, and yet on his almost third year in the Oval Office, we still haven't seen him taking on China. The most he has done so far is to push away China to look for alternative places to send their product, but not so much anything that the United States has done. So could John Delaney have a better way taking on China? I don't know, but it's a topic that's been ongoing for the longest. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue with this conversation. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, inviting you to join me every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and every weekday at 2 p.m. for discussions of social political issues and to dissect the meaning and the importance of current events, as well as to understand topics of legislations. The Fourth Branch Project is not associated with any political party, and we at the Fourth Branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to work towards achieving a more perfect union by removing ignorance, the biggest obstacle to our democracy. Stay with us. We will be right back. I do hope you enjoy this program. Tomorrow we will continue presenting you the remaining candidates who are trying to become your number one. In the meantime, if you have questions, comment, criticism, suggestion, please do not hesitate to contact us and let us know. Should you have a particular specific topic you would like us to talk about, send the information to us. We will research it and we will debate it right here on the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. I hope to see you again tomorrow at the same time. Good day. The Fourth Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.
love undercover. I'm just the kind of guy who will love you all over. And you're just the kind of girl who could watch me keel over. Tied in a tie, but I wanna